Well, cool. Hey, thank you, David, for coming on for the interview here. For anyone unfamiliar, David Harper is the founder and CEO of Bionic Turtle, and we're going to talk about the business and where it's gone recently. He's a CFA charter holder, an FRM professional. I don't know the terminology there, David, but thank you for coming on for the interview. I'm excited to talk with you about some things.
Oh, thank you, AJ. Good to be here. I think it's certified FRM is one of the acceptable
Okay.
designations, but great to be here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, yeah, no problem. So, David, from before I had talked with you and met you, I had heard of you a couple times, described as the, and I know you've heard this before about yourself, you've been described as the Mark Meldrum of FRM, and Bionic Turtle was the main independent FRM educational tool that got pretty popular, and you know your business has gone to some places for now. But just from your beginnings, how did you start Bionic Turtle? Why did you become an FRM instructor? I know you had some YouTube videos up from like 15 years ago, which was near the beginning of YouTube. So how did that all start for you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and being called the Mark Meldrum of FRM is, I cannot think of a higher compliment,
Yeah,
even though I started before him. Uh, but
right.
then he lapped me in terms of market share and numbers and all of that. But yeah, I was a management consultant for 8 years. You know, one of those traveling management
Sure.
consultants. I'd worked with a small firm that was spun off by some Bain consultants, and they had some McKinsey founders in there. And so I, as a management consultant, in the last 5 years that I did it, I was at the board level. Claim to fame there was I had consulted to Amazon one summer about almost 20 years ago up in Seattle.
Can you talk at all about what the project was that you were working on for them?
Yes, we were helping them with incentives to align with their strategy. So it included, it was an overall HR human capital assignment that
Okay.
included some performance measurement and incentive plan designs. And I'm glad you asked me that because yeah, we did. One of the things they asked us to do was look at. They were intrigued at the time. Buffett had been speaking or writing about indexed stock options,
Yeah.
and so one of the things that I got assigned to, because option valuation was my has always been sort of an expertise of mine, was the project to explore and maybe design some indexed options. We did end up doing some interesting incentive designs, but we really went down a rabbit hole in terms of indexing stock options,
Hmm.
because you know stock options in tech have always been fascinating to me, because they sort of like that they cycle in controversy, right? Even now as an investor, sometimes I'm shocked at the dilution some of these high tech companies come have with the option grants.
Sure.
And I mean, there's really something, and then there is institutional coverage of it, and so there are plenty of analysts who understand it, but I don't, you know, as far as like retail investors buying in tech, and a lot of even the semi pros analyzing the technology companies, I don't think they. It's just interesting. It's one of the things I don't think they pay a lot of attention to. You know, they'll mention it, and one of the reasons is that dilution is just hard to get your hands around. Right, the grant of an option at fair market value has zero intrinsic value, as you know.
Until the
So
price goes. Okay.
what is its real cost? And it has a cost, but it's non-trivial to enter that. So yeah, at that time. Buffett had made a comment like, or there was a reference to that. His comment, you know, if compensation isn't if options aren't compensation, then what are they? And if compensation is not an expense, what is it? And so one of the things they had us that they were considering looking at indexed option grants, especially at least for their employees. So that's just, you know, instead of an option with a fixed strike price at today's, $90 or whatever it is, it would maybe index at some cost of capital.
Okay.
But then that's a different valuation exercise, and that's a different putting it in as a whole thing. And it turned out to be, I think they liked the elegance of it, but it was a little bit of a communication headache. So they didn't end up doing it.
Communicating how the option worked to the employees and the executives that.
Exactly.
Oh, so they never actually used that strategy.
They never actually used that. They ended up using some other more typical variations of performance-based incentives, but it was real instructive for me because I spent a whole summer out there, including in some of the board meetings, with Bezos himself, and it was real instructive because I passed on the opportunity to invest in the stock. I could have bought the stock at that time, and there was a group of us at the time, and we were telling ourselves, we told ourselves, I'd never buy this stock because this culture, the culture violated like everything we'd been trained in human capital.
Okay, I know this isn't what we're talking about today, but I'm just curious now. What was it about the culture that was so atypical?
Just hard charging in the extreme, right? Like if we came in as consultants, and first of all, like as management consultant, for those who haven't done it, I'm not the last one who would glamorize it.
Okay.
A lot of what you do as a management consultant, especially after graduation, is you get on a plane Sunday, go to the client site, check into a hotel, and a lot of you do work that the company wouldn't give to its own employees, right? The associates, because I've more than once the clients would say, "Oh God, I'm glad I don't have your job," right? So, but in their case, the culture was at the time. I can't speak for today, but it was no secret that it was a really aggressive culture. So if they sort of project and you'd say, okay, we probably need 2 months to do that project realistically with this team, then the answer would come back, okay, we need it in 2 weeks. And you'd say, well, can't really. At one point, we actually flew a partner up, explained that it would take 2 months, and the answer was, "But what if you apply?" This was the phrase they were using at the time. What if you apply maniacal focus? If you applied maniacal focus, could you do it in 2 weeks?
Is maniacal different than extreme or very dialed in focus? It sounds like an evil twist on being very focused.
That's such a good point. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what is it when you maybe like on a Sunday you have plans with your family or friends and you're planning to go out, and then you get the call and everyone's going to be hauled in to the office to do that. But I would say when everyone got hauled in on a Sunday, that would be everybody, including leadership. So it was leadership by example. I think it was just total. Yeah, maniacal was the phrase they kept using. Like I said, one point the partner flew out to explain why we need to like manage expectations about what's possible in a certain time frame. And I remember the counsel said, one of the clients said, "Yeah, if you're trying to scare me, it's not scaring me. We can, anything's possible if we just like really apply ourselves." And so, It's just one of the examples of how the culture. We would just go back and go, "I'm not buying this stock," because how this is not a culture where people will stay and
right.
Develop.
No, I wouldn't expect it to be. And obviously, they've had plenty of growth since where they were at 20 years ago. So something worked about that. But man, that's surprising to hear.
Yeah, just the one perspective from a summer, and like I said, as an investor, it's one of the things one of the experiences that shapes my perception, right? Because there's that like theory that you should only invest. I don't know if it's Peter Lynch or theory that you should invest in what you know. And then as a management consultant, I start from this humility principle that, I don't really know any of my companies, right? Like you have to first of all be on the board, and then the board in some cases, we know from cases, doesn't really know the company. So you'd have to be really in the company, employed at the company to actually really know the company. So just as a matter of like epistemology,
yeah,
there's just the theory that the idea that I was consulting to a company that turned out to be such a great stock investment, would have passed on it, and at the time being inside just informs a humility principle that very probabilistic about my investing. I just start from the idea I don't really know all the risks, and it's a probabilistic exercise. So at what sort of layer of abstraction and ignorance am I operating from?
Yeah, certainly. If you were that close into it, and you didn't have a complete understanding of, the growth prospects of the business, and I tell people that that are ask me about being equity research analysts, and they'll ask what are some of the most valuable classes that I can do in undergrad, is a common question I'll get on the YouTube channel, and I say accounting classes, because if you don't understand everything about that company's balance sheet, income statement, statement of cash flows, and all of their competitors probably, or at least their 4 or 5 closest competitors, it would be impossible, in my opinion, to gauge where their capital is being spent, their growth throughout the quarters and years, and all those types of things. So, of course, in the last 10 years, a very momentum-driven or qualitative-driven investing strategy has been successful for a lot of people, but you don't really know how things are going at the business unless you understand, like you said, daily operations from an employee level all the way up through management, and then working on the board, and the message I share with people, understanding the financial statements in detail and comparing those financial statements to competitors. There's a lot of information that people would have to know to be able to make the most informed opinions. So taking a very humble and risk-based approach towards investing is probably a smart idea there.
Well, I happen to agree with you. Let me ask you a question. Let's just say you're not a full-time professional, right? Equity analyst, sell side or buy side, which most of us aren't, right? As an investor, it's a part-time activity. I do it after my job.
Right.
So if what you just said is true, how many companies could I realistically cover for myself, including to analyze the financial statements and understand just the financial statements?
Maybe one pocket of one sector, so maybe 4 or 5, but my personal opinion is 0. I don't think a part-time semi-pro, and especially a retail investor, can completely understand the growth trajectory and operations of any major corporation, but maybe 4 to 5 if I had to pick a number.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I'm on Seeking Alpha. I write articles when I can, but I read a lot of the articles, and that's a mix. Seeking Alpha, my impression is it's a mix of there are professionals there, but also savvy individuals, and I'm not sure how many even the savvy individuals even look at the financial statements.
Right. Yeah, I'm not saying I'm above that. I invested in a stock this past week. I don't want to mention it because I don't want it to come off as investment advice, but just one of the major tech companies that's down more than 70%, which there are plenty of them now.
Right.
And I don't know much. I'm a CFA charter holder. I'll tell you, I don't know almost anything about their balance sheet. I just think it's a name that's going to exist 10 years from now and still going to be popular, and I like the stock price at an 80% discount, from where it was at the beginning of this year. So, I'll do a little bit of that personally, but it's definitely difficult to invest like Warren Buffett did in the 40s and 50s today.
Yes. Okay, so don't tell me the name, but what's the ticker?
I'll tell you after the recording. I'll give you my genius insight on that one. So David, you were doing the consulting. Why did you decide to start FRM teaching?
Yeah, sorry. Well, I've always been a lifelong learner, and even to this day, with some of the exams, I'll look at the syllabus as sort of guidance on what to read. And I had taken the CFA because I was attracted to the syllabus, and prior to that, and then I took I saw the FRM syllabus, and it just looked like an interesting reading list to me at the time. When I took it, I think it was just one part. I should remember, but I think it was just one exam. They split it. They split it right after the financial crisis into two parts. But I saw this reading syllabus, and as is my habit as a lifelong learner, I'll look for ways to make myself accountable. That has changed a lot. In the meantime, now a lot of the education that I consume, they've become a lot more sophisticated about helping you with the psychology of self accountability.
Yeah.
But at that time, I just thought, okay, I want to do the reading list, and then without the exam, I would just set it aside. So then I took it. I was interested in it. I took one of the providers who was in the space. There wasn't very many at the time. I won't mention the name of that company, and then I just thought, well, it was two things. I thought, like a lot of people who end up doing test prep, they think they could do a better job themselves than the prep they consumed. But also, I was also taking courses at lynda.com, Lynda, lynda.com, which at the time she started that company here, not far from me in Southern California, and I was taking Adobe Illustrator and learning that, and a little bit of Photoshop, which are both hard programs to learn. And when I took this course from lynda.com and Adobe Illustrator, and it was just like a revelation to me. I mean, this was maybe 20 years ago. The online learning, having one of the world's best Illustrator instructors show you, and you could watch over their shoulder, was just sort of a revelation to me. I just thought, well, I want to do that. I want to do that for business. And then I had the FRM CFA, and I thought the FRM would be a good place to start. I really had in mind the idea of a broader school, and I thought the FRM would be a good place to start because the perceived difficulty was high. So I thought, well, if I had credibility in a difficult area of finance, that would give, that might establish a base.
Yeah.
That I could go to in anywhere finance. But I ended up selling, a year ago.
Yep.
I did not really realize that aspiration to become a broader school in finance and business. I had a bigger dream for that. Really, lynda.com was like the spiritual inspiration, actually. She's great. They let me go out there, and she gave me a tour, and I spent time with her. And it was really that when I started, it was really informed by my experience as a customer at lynda.com, and then also going out there and getting a little bit of unsolicited mentorship. I had asked for the mentorship.
Okay, so you're using an online educational platform. You liked the idea. You knew you could do something similar. How long were you? Was it called Bionic Turtle originally? Where'd you come up with that name?
I thought Bionic Tutor. I was going to call it Bionic Tutor, and then I just decided to try to be cute.
Okay.
And I flipped Bionic Tutor to Bionic Turtle, and then I thought it was a cool juxtaposition. Turtle, overthinking, typical me, right? Turtle, slow learner. Add technology to that, and then I thought the turtle would suggest friendliness, like we're accessible. So I did mean for it to be like cute and friendly, so non-intimidating. I had looked at some of the, there were providers even in the FRM space at the time, and I just went down the list, and what I saw were like, how to put it, Ivy League credentialism, like we're a serious school that you can trust for this. And I thought, okay, how to stand out? How could I stand out for that? And I thought, well, a sort of a friendly turtle would sort of like, in sort of like fun, sort of contrast from the institutional seriousness. It was my thinking on that, but I was just starting. I didn't really have good experience as an entrepreneur. Not really a natural entrepreneur. So I overthought that whole thing. Right? People ask me now. I just say, pick a simple name. It's great if the name connotes what you do, which mine does not.
Right.
And then just be consistent. You don't need to spend a long time on the logo. Just be consistent and just get on with the next step. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. When you mentioned kind of a purposeful decision there, I thought you were going to say like a tortoise versus the hare type analogy towards studying and learning, or that was originally my perception of what Bionic Turtle might mean. And that sort of makes sense too. But okay, so you were doing Bionic Turtle for, correct me if this timeline's wrong, a few years, and then you started uploading onto YouTube, or did you start using YouTube as a outreach tool right away?
Yeah, I cannot remember. YouTube wasn't deliberate. I mean, if I could, in retrospect, I would have when I first. I think it took a little while for me to realize that YouTube was a good place to be, and that I've been sporadic about it. And in retrospect, if I'd have known, would have got on YouTube with some serious consistency throughout, that probably would have been worth it. I was always sporadic, because it does take time, and then I wasn't. There's a lot of learning in how to do it, and I think even like what's successful on YouTube in the meantime has become a lot more professionalized.
Mm-hmm.
So
even though, all you say is probably true, but I also think you're not giving yourself enough credit, because 15 years ago, I think was the first videos on your channel. That was far before most people were utilizing YouTube. So you saw something there. I mean, even if you weren't doing it consistently early on, you were taking advantage of it at least somewhat, and I'm sure that didn't hurt, the growth of Bionic Turtle.
Yeah, that's true. That was probably informed, the lynda.com, that their business is really videos first. And
sure.
Yeah, that's interesting because, we were talking about Mark Meldrum. Their business is really video first. I knew they do have other components. And it's something I think about a lot because, he's been so successful in video, and it's video first. Video is one of my components. I've come in and out sort of cyclically, frankly, depending on my workload and other components. But in the meantime, I'd say the component that I'm known for is actually the practice questions. So, it's not to say I appreciate the value of video, and I'm always interested like how to do it more efficiently. But we're working on this currently, just how to do it more efficiently, because Mark Meldrum has a much more efficient ratio of just in general of like prep time to actual video time. The denominator there is very high. Putting out those market updates 1-2 hours. I would have done more of it if I had a more efficient ratio of prep to video production. I think just part of the perfectionist tendencies can really get you spend a lot of time on the prep. But
so I want to ask you about one of the earlier pieces I saw from you, which was a letter, I think, directly to the governing body of the FRM exams, saying how to improve the FRM designation. That was a handful of years ago now. Why did you write the letter? What was the premise?
Yeah, thank you for asking me that. And just for noticing, that's how to fix the FRM. That was in 2018, so it's really only been 4 years ago. By that time, I had been in the space for many years. As I mentioned, as far as the FRM, probably the big events are when it's split into two. And a way to look at that is they took advantage of the financial crisis, and there's a bit of a jump step in the FRM audience after the financial crisis.
Sure, yeah.
As you would expect. So it really got on the map after the financial crisis. And there's always been a FRM and a PRM. By the FRM is the association. There is GARP Global Association of Risk Professionals. That's the association that administers the FRM, and in theory competes with PRIMA, Professional Risk Managers Association. I forget what the I stands for.
Okay.
And their exam is the PRM, Professional Risk Manager. High overlap. One of the authors there is Carol Alexander, who's published a 4-part book on market risk. That one is the best authors in the business and best instructors. So they got some great talent on the PRM side, but GARP has just been a lot more. GARP is a lot more successful in marketing the exam, frankly. And then also, there's that circular effect. At this point now, if someone wants a designation, part of a good reason to pick the FRM over the PRM is simply that there's just a lot more FRM. So despite the fact that PRM core syllabus is always, because of Carol Alexander, is always theoretically very strong, very attractive to me as a syllabus, but they just didn't line up the business behind that exam in the way that GARP did. So sorry for that detour. Just want to put that in context. That that was I guess a global financial crisis 07-08. So the 08-09 was about when it split into 2 parts. And so then just fast forward to 2018, one of the decisions that I had made was to invest in my forum, right? Probably the 2 things that I'm known for is the practice questions and then the forum support. I invested early in the forum in a way that, not necessarily the best business decision because I've overinvested in it. But that's just, love what I do, love interacting with customers and non-customers on the forum. And so really, since I've been doing it, I start every day in the forum and look at and answer as many questions as I can.
Yeah. Lately,
not all of them. And so that's really the source of my own expertise. It's not from reading the textbooks. It's from engaging in when problems and conversations in my forum is 90% of, at this point, the source of my expertise, right?
Yeah.
That's where you learn. We have textbooks, we have fixed income. We have a great textbook, Bruce Tuckman. I've read that many, many times. And my expertise in fixed income is not because I've read him or the other 3 dozen books on fixed income that I've read. It's because I've had to engage with people on the particulars of that, often in the context of a practice question,
right.
Practice question with errors or GARP's own errors and all of that. So I had invested in the forum, and then so one of the byproducts of the forum is that you get to know the customer base better than the association. There's
sure.
I know the FRM customer base better than the association, no question about it. I don't think anyone would question that by virtue of the forum. GARP, they have flirted with it. They started a forum and then but they didn't continue. It's very, a forum is work because you have to show up every day. At least for a while, at least initially. I would say the forum is like a subset of a community, because nowadays you could talk about how you would generate a community, and a forum is not the only way to do that, or necessarily the best way to do that. So let me just say community. I was committed to some kind of community, and then having invested in that, I had the benefit of customer feedback about the exam. And still to this day, like I said, in ways that are superior to the association, and they know that as well. They monitor my forums, so it was just inevitable that my high standard would eventually get frustrated by candidate experiences. Because we may talk about this, but the CFA has a higher standard than the FRM, and I'll just say that I have plenty of I'm on record of that and plenty of documentation on that. And that you could defend it by saying that the CFA institution is more mature,
Sure.
which they are. They have a longer track record. So let's just defend it that way. At the same time, I was just frustrated in terms of that memo reflects both in some ways with the syllabus, but also with the exam itself. So after the exam, for years now, and even to this day, candidates would come back and feedback, and there would just be problems with questions. And so this is still a point of frustration to me. Okay. I feel like candidates who pay, they pay $1,000 or more and spend, 800 to, well, let's say 600 to 1,000 hours, maybe over 2 parts. Well, it's a wide range, but so they are owed good questions on the exam. So the first reason was just that we had just collected, it's in the memo, a number of just flaws that were just troubling to me about, mastery of the syllabus. And then the syllabus itself, it's in the memo, and I've broken that out in different categories, but I just wanted a higher standard on behalf of my customers and the candidate base in general with respect to the syllabus. That included just start with some baseline quality, something that I've talked with Mark Meldrum about when we were talking about differences between the exam. It just starts with like quality control, right? We precision in the definitions and in the computations, and so I don't like to see the association put any errors out on that, because it's confusing to new candidates especially. There's an interesting dynamic. I live with the exam every year after year. Most of the candidates come in, they're just tourists for a year to learn material. Most assume that what the association published is accurate. It's just fascinating to me. They'll put up a practice question and they just assume it's accurate. And then I'll say, no, never assume that what's published in a textbook or by any institution is accurate. This is where you first can apply your own independent thinking. So we'll debug it. So it starts with that, and then some of them are not just errors, but just a matter of a higher standard about consistency. I talked with Mark about this as well. The FRM, until recently, both parts were a reading list. I call that an anthology.
Sure.
So that's where you publish. You basically, for each part, you publish a list of things you're going to read, and it's categorized. That's a great business model. The drawback to that is that the institution didn't build its own mastery in that. So now part 1 is now published by GARP. However, if you take like a big section of that is derivatives. John Hall, the author, his Bible, options, futures, other derivatives, high overlap with CFA. Up until a few years ago, that part 1 derivatives was most of his book. Chapter assignments, a fantastic book, right? In the 10th edition now, 10th or 11th, a fantastic stress-tested book. And then for part 1 now, it's now been replaced by their own readings, but John Hall is the primary author on that. So they're abbreviated readings. But the other thing, when you do the reading list approach in finance, is you introduce a lot of discrepancies in terms of definitions. So like in my memo on default probability or alpha, goes into the painful detail and how some of those terms that you might think default probability has one definition, it does not. You might think information ratio has one definition, but technically it has 4. And now, because of our feedback, there are 2 that are acceptable on the exam. So, part of that is you just want candidates deserve rigor and a standard in the in the syllabus that they're getting, and also in the exam. And then more recently, it deserves some updating. The iron of the FRM is it changes so much because risk is dynamic, but you've still got some of the readings in there now are approaching 20 years old. So like credit risk, for example, they've got to be updated, right? Some of those credit risk readings that are literally almost 20 years old need to be updated.
Okay. So you had the forum, you were investing into that, you grew the business from those early years. You're a major provider, if not the number one provider of FRM education around that time with the memo. And then last year you sold the business. So congratulations on the sale. That's a big deal, huge accomplishment. What was the motivation there? And to Serify, which I understand is like a conglomerate, educational group put together by Leeds, the private equity firm. What was the motivation there? How did the deal go for you? And how are things nowadays?
Yeah, very good. No, that summarizes it. Yeah, sold it February 2021, so it's been a little over a year. And it was really time for me to sell it because I needed help to take it to the next level. So there's a few reasons for that. One of them is technology. Another thing that I have in common with Mark Meldrum, it turned out to be a common reason. I think I have three reasons, but one of the reasons that genuinely that we had in common was the simple problem of technology. And it just got to be, it was always a pain for me as an entrepreneur. I mean, because in the early years, as a founder, I don't think most people would want to could be founders, right? Because I didn't know what I was getting into, frankly. And in a way, is like a reluctant entrepreneur. I prefer to be like in the lab doing my tech stuff or doing my coding and writing and just being left alone to do that. A founder needs to be so much more. So I don't think I'd ever be a great founder, just because there's so many things you need to worry about. And then one of them is tech, but I did always have the personality that I would do whatever it takes. I'll learn anything. So when I started, I learned the coding I learned how to code so I could build the website.
Wow.
And I actually went through different iterations. I learned several languages. I learned CMS, and I still code to this day, but now for data science. But so in the early years, 50% of my time was just on the website, the what? CMS.
Wait, why didn't you pay a vendor to make the website for you?
Yeah, I should have. Well, I did a few years in.
Okay.
So I just meant for a few years.
Gotcha. For
a few years, don't look at me for how to do this, right?
No, I'm just yeah. That's surprising. I don't know, not that I've talked to a ton of founders, but everyone that I can think of that I know who's launched a brand before didn't learn to code so that they could code their own website. That's a unique starting point.
Right, and that's you shouldn't do that. So I just I didn't want to spend the money.
Sure. Yeah.
And also I am learning really is my religion. So
okay.
If I glance the lynda.com has great course, still has great courses on PHP, the content management system, all that. So yeah, not smart, but as a lifelong learner, it's a great challenge. But yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, my best friend a few years in, he said you're spending 50% of your time on the tech, that you're being stupid. Stop being stupid. So I did just a few years in, but I'd gone through three iterations of I had actually coded my own robust website with Forum, Expression Engine content management system. I did contract out for some help on the e-commerce. I mean, I didn't need help on that, okay. but it did do everything. And and it actually didn't look terrible either. But because of course I went to lynn.com and I took the courses on web design. So, but no, not smart at all. But I did end up going out to hire that out. But this is the other thing though. So then for over a decade I've been using tech vendors, if you will.
Yep.
But that is easier said than done. This goes back to the reason that one of the factors that each of us sold, hiring tech talent has still been one of the great headaches of the whole business. And if there are moments when I wanted to quit, it's when I was dealing with even the tech that my vendors were doing. So like more recently, there's always been a challenge of the people that you want to hire. For me, the people that you want to work on your site, it's your business, it's your baby, it's online. I mean, there's the online impression there's nothing more important than that. So the people that always wanted to work on that were the best. And then, you go out to hire the best and they're busy. This has always been true. And, I spent so much time trying to get onto the calendar of the talent that I wanted to help me. And then, so the nuance, the dynamics of it have changed recently, but I'd still say that's really difficult. I mean, if you gave me the one job I would not want today, it's like, go find the tech person to go do this particular thing for you. Because, if they're good, they're busy and they have options, and that's good for them. And then their options include like what projects are interesting or not, right? In my perception, in that space, talent really has the leverage. They also get to choose their projects. So you go bid on stuff. It's a little like buying a house in Southern California. For some of them, it's like it wasn't even price. You get an audition.
Yeah. Like
I'll pay. Oh, it doesn't matter what you pay me. Tell me why the project would be interesting to me, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah. So I've done everything on that. I went offshore to India. I went offshore to other places. I came back onshore for cost. You can go offshore. You just get, I know the cultural differences. There are cultures where, you go offshore and culturally they won't tell you what they can't do. So they'll say, sure, we can do this. You get down the project and they actually can't do that. And they didn't tell you that. And that's cultural. So a lot of little bear traps there. Long-winded way of saying, having the tech off my plate, where I could actually just do the code practice that I like to do, which is data science, is like the best thing in my life about it.
Okay. So in your conversation with Mark, I heard you mention, David, you said, I'd always had, I don't know if you would use the term negative perception of private equity companies, but just a less than great idea on what dealing with a private equity firm would be like. But you mentioned that it has been better. It's been a great experience for you. So why was it that you were hesitant to a private equity firm? And I'm also just kind of curious, like, how did they even approach you? Is it just an email? Hey, can I buy your business? I mean, how does that even work?
Yeah. No, thank you. Well, I was as a management consultant, I had focused on tech and finance because I thought, those were the industries I wanted exposure with, tech and financial services. So I did. I had consulted to more than one private equity, but a lot of different funds, investment banks.
Okay.
I knew enough about private equity to have my own belief that I just did not want to. How do I say this? I just did not want to deal with private equity people.
Sure.
I did not like private equity folks
because they're very like Ivy League and pretentious, or what?
Well, it was just based on my. Is this based on my consulting experience, not my current experience? No, that it was just about the money and not the business. Like I just like passion for product, passion for customer, those things about the business. That's what's interesting me, right? The product and customer. And I spent time in the private equity where I was like, just about the money.
Yeah.
And then what the consequences of that could be. And I think there's plenty of press about how that can be challenging, consequences be challenging. But I think that's a whole topic, because, you know, a balanced view, I'm actually now grateful for private equity, right? Private equity in my case has enabled investment funds to create this organization that I believe is disruptive and is in service of better learner outcomes.
Okay.
And you know, how else could I have done it with private equity? You know, well, I guess there are other ways, but it's an important means for me to be able to do it. So yeah, I changed my mind on that, but it was just because I had a consulting experience with, you know, I won't name the firms, but I had the firms. And then to your point too, you know, I didn't they weren't necessarily my personalities either.
Sure.
Right? But so it's a little bit about the personalities and what I learned. And but you know, that the business, it's almost impossible to get a job in private equity, because they're super smart, super hardworking. So yeah, you know, there's no mystery that it attracts the most talented people.
So you and Mark have are not partners, but colleagues now under the same umbrella with Serify, and I'm sure I'm sure they're very thankful for having you, because you know had a relationship with Mark and may have been part of the reason that you know they were able to get it in with him. I don't know, but yeah, talk about that a little bit, or just in Mark's business in general. You had mentioned his operations, his website, and that you were impressed by those things. So what is it that you've tried to take away from that?
Yes. Oh, and do you mind if I just answer the other part first? Because
Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry. That was like
you might. No. I'm sorry. No, I enjoy this because I need more practice just having the
sure.
open-ended conversations. Because you might find this interesting how it happened. And then I definitely will go back to what you just asked about. I was putting off selling, even though I felt like I needed to sell in order to get to the next level, where technology was one of the issues, but where the other problem was just my own personality. You know, I'd old enough and mature enough to recognize that a founder needs to wear several hats, and I really like the one or two hats and not all of the hats.
Yeah.
And I just wanted the help. So, and then when I became open to it, and Eric at Leeds, I can't remember how we first came into contact, but I had been in contact with Eric at Leeds. But I'd been approached by a few firms, but including Surgent, which is now Knowfully.
Okay.
And also I had been in conversation with Kaplan as well. So
sure.
What happened in 2019, I just got into a situation where I was going to choose between Kaplan and Surgent, now Knowfully, and I really liked Knowfully, and I still think a great organization, and like Liz Kohler over there. I think she's fantastic, and I just felt like I'd made a decision that I was going to sell to Knowfully, and also like the CEO at the time a lot. And so then I got the week that the board approved my purchase on terms that I really liked, like literally 3 days later, I got served with a lawsuit by Wiley.
Oh.
So that was the first time I've been sued, and that was Thanksgiving week of I guess 2019. And so that derailed my plans to sell to Knowfully, and then put me on a 8 or 9 month detour with that lawsuit that I ended up settling with Wiley. And Then when I came out of that, Knowfully had Surgent had a new CEO, and my chemistry with Surgent was different. And but Eric called and they were still interested, and so then I picked up with Eric at Serify. But
Okay.
but that was that experience informed me a lot, just because I got sued for copyright infringement because a contractor did copy material and many of those textbooks in the FRMR Wiley.
Mm.
And so they sued me, and that was really that taught me a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's another thing about being another like risk of being a founder on your own. I hadn't really considered legal risk, frankly.
Right.
I just assumed, if you do the right thing, everything's gonna be okay. But it's not actually like that. There are businesses out there that use the legal system if they can.
Mm-hmm.
And and now so I learned a lot about copyright in that process, which I hadn't really been focused on before. But then the Serify deal came along, and that worked out really well for me.
Well, good.
Yeah.
And I know it's been good. I mean, in the past year or so, it's not like Mark talks about this all the time on his channel. It's not like you guys sold the businesses to them and then they tripled the prices and commoditized all the content or anything like that. So I'm sure that they're what you described as being about the product and the service, and so it's good for you guys, good for your not customers, subscribers, everyone all around. So it's good to hear.
Yeah, I would say, I think Matt, our CEO, has two principles about the acquisition, because I got to hear them again because he was sharing them with Mark Meldrum, and they make a lot of sense. It's first, do no harm, and the second one is add value, and they really acted that way. There's quite a few units in the business now, so it's good to first do no harm, because it's very challenging to combine different businesses. But I don't think except we've updated the website. Except for that, I don't think my customers would have noticed.
Nice.
It's kind of cool.
So now, again, back to the earlier question. Working with Mark now, how is that going? How's it been? What do you have any takeaways from it? Things like that.
Well, that deal only closed recently, right? So they've just started, from my perspective, and so I think the organization is probably still learning, what they're doing and how well they're doing it, and
they have to be able to make his website look better, right? I mean, it's like the worst looking websites is Berkshire Hathaway's, and then markmeldrum.com. I think they'll be able to make some improvements pretty quickly on it.
Oh, that's funny. That's good. Yeah, that may be true.
Yeah.
Although I think design is not the thing, right? It's
that's true.
It's like usability.
Yeah, and his customers will rave all day long on forums online about how great the content is, and so that's one of the reasons why he wins. But yes.
Well, yeah, I'm astonished by that. I was sharing that on our Slack, on the Reddit. I saw a Reddit thread a couple weeks ago, and the question was, should I go with Wiley or Kaplan for CFA? Right, that's the question. Wiley or Kaplan?
Right.
And then you go down the answer.
Mark.
And most of them were like Mark Meldrum decisively.
Right.
And I shared that internally, because he hasn't been in that business very many years. It's a really competitive business. You don't really it takes a while to get into exams, because you have to produce some good outcomes. So it doesn't matter how good you are. It takes a few years to produce some social proof. So what they did in a few years to show up like that, where the question is between two public competitors, mm-hmm. and everyone's going, it's astonishing achievement, and then yeah, I've since learned that there's a lot about the team he has there.
Okay.
Amazing team, and I mean that because that's a founder also has to build a team,
right?
And so some people have better personalities for that, and so I mean I'm not exaggerating. They just showed up and they are already coaching me on how to do things differently and better. And if I had done that earlier, I'd have been more successful. So yeah, it's him, but it's his team. And yeah, I'm interested in what you think. The one thing I knew about him is his work ethic, because it's obvious. I asked him about that. He said well, it's work ethic, but also I'm interested to see if you agree. It's also like trust. I just don't think that's just a really trusted brand, right?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like Mark Meldrum's going to tell you the truth. And like when I asked him about a work ethic, he said, "Well, part of it is no family, right?
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
No family to distract me." So that made sense.
He's a realist. He's honest and he's a realist. He's like, hey, I work an extra 3 hours in the evenings when someone else would be, with their family. So I have a leg up there. And I'm like, yeah, that's true.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So I've thought about it. I think there are a handful of reasons, but it's especially impressive because of what you mentioned, David. He hasn't been doing it all that long. And when I was getting into the CFA program, I spent a ton of time on, mostly it was Analyst Forum then. People weren't really on Reddit. There was like Wall Street Oasis was smaller, but Analyst Forum was real popular for the CFA exams. Wiley or Kaplan, whatever. Wiley Kaplan was all this stuff. And I made a disdecision. No one was saying Mark Meldrum in 2015. I don't think I saw the name once. And or actually, yeah, maybe 2015 was when he first started his paid service, because he was on YouTube right around then. So he wasn't even an option. So to go from that to he's the number 2 provider now of CFA content is just extraordinary. And I think it's a few things. It's his personality, not in the sense that he has a big personality like the YouTube algorithm loves, and like I sort of try to be on my YouTube channel, and in some sense I sort of have. It's just that he's such an honest realist. And I think in many industries, that personality wouldn't succeed as well. I think if he was selling athletic clothing or something, people would be like, wow, but it's a distinguished academic professional designation, and so people are smart, and people want the truth, and people can pretty easily sniff out BS, and Mark doesn't have any. Everything he says is just real, down to the point. He's a great educator. I don't want to say it's the biggest reason, but so part of my answer for why I think he's had so much success, I would say maybe 50% of it is just that he made the content. Because I'm going back to my own scenario. The reason I have a YouTube channel now talking about CFA exams is because nobody had one. I don't think I'm a great YouTuber, but there was nobody doing it. And I consumed all my media on YouTube. I didn't have cable or newspapers or anything like that. I just YouTube everything that I would watch. So when I was a CFA candidate, there was like 4 videos on YouTube. One guy who had passed all the exams, one girl. I can remember these videos because I watched each one like 5 times. Nobody was, so it was the same thing for CFA instruction. There was nobody. So Mark just came in and started providing free CFA tutoring on YouTube, and that content, I think, is what gave him the reach. Now, once you have the reach, you have to be really good at providing that content. You have to be a good teacher for people to stay, and especially to refer other people, online. So he did what no one else was doing, is he started creating the content on YouTube, and then he was the person he is, which is such a honest personality and also a great instructor. And so all those three things together have kind of catapulted him amongst CFA test prep providers to the point where someone asks, should I pick Wiley or Kaplan, and there's 83 answers that I'll say Mark Meldrum.
Right.
Which is just crazy.
Yeah, great perspective. That makes a ton of sense to me. I agree with you about the great educator too. I think a lot about like what's the what's the art and secret science of that? Because it's not something I can like quantify. He also has a point of view. When I talked to him about investing, I found that like a difference between us. I find it asking about something, he has a point of view on it.
Sure.
And then I'm more. I'm a lot more. I'm an introvert, INTJ. I don't know if those typologies matter, but yeah, you asked me something. Like I was talking to him about investing, and he said something like, well, 90% of it is asset allocation or sector selection or something like that. And I think it was was what I've heard before with the Brinson studies. Basically say, don't waste your time on picking stocks. It's about asset allocation. And he made the argument, and it persuaded me at the point of view. But he asked me on that. I'm like, I'm gonna sit here and like, I'm just not sure. I need to do my homework on that. There's pros and cons. I don't necessarily have a point of view. I started like an uncertain space. It's not necessarily, as an educator, I think it's good to have a point of view on some of these topics.
Yeah, you're a lot more personable, he can be divisive too, but I think even when someone disagrees with the opinion, it's still more engaging to listen to. I think it's more engaging to listen, certainly if you agree with an opinion, but even if you disagree with that opinion, you're more engaged than if there was no opinion whatsoever. And, well, I'll leave kind of politics out of it. I think most people sort of agree with his opinions when he does share those opinions, because we're all in the finance field and have certain views on how the economy works and things of that nature. So, yeah, it's all interesting, but I want to ask you about your investing too, David. So, Mark, I share that with clients. I'm a retail financial advisor working with everyday people retiring and trying to get to that point. And so, I'll tell people, well, asset allocation is 97% of your investing returns. And that's a really general way to say being a moderate aggressive investor is going to give you a much different return profile than a moderate conservative investor. Not so far in 2022, I guess, but through most calendar years. And so I'm curious about how you approach, being an FRM professional, your risk allocation in your equity investing, at least now.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's still a work in progress. I mean, first of all, that's why I like it. I mean, I think of my equity portfolio as having two functions, right? I'm investing for returns, but I'm also investing to learn. I mean, learning my religion. I love to make an initial investment in a company because it motivates me then to learn more about the company. So I have an initial size. I have a size that constitutes my initial investment in a company, and really that is a way for me to signal to myself that you are now going to be learning more about this company.
Okay.
And if you learn more and you like it more, you'll add to the position.
Sure.
I almost think of it as a learning exercise first.
Wow.
And that's, well, it's just because the companies I'm in they're generally fascinate me, and they spark my imagination.
Yep.
And they, I suppose there's all sorts of biases. You can't get rid of those, but they're generally like, I have a large position in Coursera, a space. I work in ed tech. Coursera is one of the leading public ed tech companies. So
you have a
win-win for me.
Article about them, but I don't know their business. Aren't you a competitor to them?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, broadly defined. Yes, we're not direct competitors yet. I think I routinely share on our Slack my analyses and updates. I mean, every week, things I've learned from Coursera, 2U is another company, Chegg, Instructure. I'm and I have positions in many of those companies in that space. So, yeah, they're. If you define it broadly enough, they're a competitor, not directly, but your point's still relevant. we're on a trajectory, so why not take them seriously now as a competitor and learn from what they're doing?
So do you want to talk about that piece at all with Coursera or
Coursera? Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah. You probably wouldn't get me to shut up, but well, it's just one of my favorite positions because I think it's a great example of, like, Wall Street doesn't, it's just under the radar. Wall Street's in no position to appreciate, the disruptive innovation. I think like Cathie Wood style investing, where I don't actually think she's practicing that stated style. She trades way too much, but I do actually believe in that Cathie Wood philosophy.
Looking for 15-year innovators type thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Or even less time. But you take like Coursera, they have some Morgan Stanley coverage. A little beyond that, I'm not that familiar, and they understand it pretty well. But they still don't really understand the potential of that company. Like with Coursera, they're founded by two artificial intelligence experts out of Stanford. So most people look at that, like in ed tech, what's going on with a lot. My favorite opportunity to take advantage of is the guilt by association. To me, guilt by association is one of the best evidence that the markets aren't efficient, right? You look at I'm also in home builders for diversification, but if you look at like Coursera and its Wall Street cluster of ed tech, right now it's all guilt by association is my view.
Okay.
You could call that a kind of factor or beta factor if you want.
You're referring to their stock price?
Yep.
Okay,
I'm referring.
gotcha.
Yeah. Sorry. Their stock price or valuation. On short time frames, just like home builders, the correlation is very high,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
So they're the market's basically treating them as similar. Just was recently having this debate with somebody about like Chegg. It's also put into that category.
Yeah.
Chegg has had a disappointing quarter after another disappointing few months, and so this is just part of the overall disappointment in the ed tech, and so those stocks are all in serious drawdown. So my perspective there with Coursera is just like, it's mostly guilt by association. It's mostly because the market is not yet actually valuing that company for its actual fundamentals and for its actual ability to dominate in terms of market share. So like they have they're applying. They have a lot of data, and they're building a skills graph, sort of like Facebook has a social graph, Asana has a work graph, Coursera is building a skills graph. And to my knowledge, that would be they're building the world's largest skills graph. They share some of that research, but if you think about the future of talent, I think that skills graph is just an amazing source of moat. And they're already using it to apply machine learning to learner outcomes and to course construction and so on and so on. So I would just say in short, it's a great example of a company that's they're actually a tech company. They're actually an AI company. That's a company that's applying artificial intelligence as we speak to skills, its skills graph and skills development, which I don't know, when I think about it, I just think that's going to be one of the biggest areas going. It's one of the most important areas. What's more important than helping, in this economy and what we're going into, helping workers of all sorts, including gig workers, add to skills to become more marketable, right? The value of they do degrees, they do certificates, they're increasingly a lot of short form courses, but just increasingly you hear this thing of, it's not the degree that matters so much. We may not care if you have a degree. it's the skills in the portfolio that you bring to it. So I think they're going to be playing a big part in that.
Yeah, I did a sponsored video on YouTube for Financial Edge a couple of weeks ago, and they do something. I don't know the course offering with the name that you mentioned, but it is that it's going. Why do you need this formalized degree to get the education to learn how to be an equity research analyst or trader or investment banker or work on Excel models? You should be able to learn all of the tools to create a discounted cash flow model in Excel from home online. You don't have to pay $40,000 a year to do that at college, and it's so true. And so yeah, you might have with that approach, that skills graph using the artificial intelligence to develop that, a pretty good moat in the space with that stock.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
That's the thing about data. One of the network effects, right? You want to be if you want to be the company that's aggregating the relevant data. So just like reading some of this week, they put out some fascinating applications of machine learning to that data. Where they're really breaking out like what moves learner outcomes. They'll measure like they found that first year retention is the key dependent variable, right? Like you go through, like even on a 4-year degree, you really only need to look at who was retained to the first year as a high correlation to all of their outcomes. Yeah. And then they fixate on the dependent, and then they've learned a lot about all of the. There's like 1,000 little things that run into that, and they've learned a lot about the little things that move that dial 3%, 6%.
That reminds me a little bit. I really like the movie Moneyball, where I think he went to Harvard or Yale. He was a Yale economist, got hired by the Oakland A's, one of the MLB baseball teams, and had a different approach towards evaluating players because everyone else was going, oh, he's got a great swing and a good throw, and so it's just totally left up to personal opinion. And I was talking with the operations manager at the company where I work a couple of months ago, because it seems to me that hiring talent goes the exact same way, where it's like, oh, they have a nice attitude, and it's not that those things aren't valuable in the workplace, but it's very subjective and less. I think you could display attractive hiring qualities artificially with practice. I know I'm guilty, but when you're taking a data-driven algorithmic approach towards evaluating baseball players like they did in the movie Moneyball, I figure you could do something similarly to evaluating hires at a company, and maybe that's one of the manifestations of the skills graph that you're talking about.
Oh yeah, that's cool, right? Billy Bean, right?
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Thank you.
Brad Pitt played him. I think it was Aaron Sorkin script. That's part of why I like that movie so much, because I like what he does. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and they're doing it. They're also doing it like even with the pathways for the learner, right? So if you go into, if a learner is thinking, if someone's trying to decide what they're going to do for picking a course, maybe they, instead of a 4-year degree, it's sort of like a pretty rigid perspective, right? Yeah. 4-year degree defined by somebody else. There's a more stacking, so that it's more of a, I take this course, and then the data can help me inform what choices I go next on the path, and so I can stack and even stack the credential and design the learning a little bit more to what's tailored for me, but also maybe I may know the destination even when I start. So I think there's just a lot of some flexibility and data applied to that.
When you write a piece like that, David, you could do like the market update, or just you could title it anything and upload it to YouTube. You could put it on your forums, but you put it on Seeking Alpha. What is it about being a contributor there, or just that platform in general that you like?
Oh yeah, no, I hadn't thought about that. Thank you for asking me that. Well, what I come to think of it, I think it's the same thing that I over-invested in my forum. It's the for feedback.
Okay.
It's because Seeking Alpha has a huge audience, and a lot of them I really like, and they add new authors all the time. super impressive. Sometimes it's like some engineer who's already, doing a job and has a passion for this, and then he puts up something, or she, and it's like an amazing article on this on a tech stock with just unique insight. So I love that anyone can go on there. So if you put that up, if you put a piece up there, you're going to get feedback. That's the thing. And then so even with Coursera, there's a few other guys on there that cover those companies like me. So you just get into dialogue about that, and that's what it's just like you have a point of view. But then when you get asked a question, it's the same thing. Like when I was, I used to consult the money managers. They'd have interesting conversations about the investments. So here, being virtual, that's you have a thesis for the company. I'm so invested in that I'm subject to all these biases. But then somebody then asks you a question. Well, what about that skills graph? So that I think it's because of that. And I've joined some groups in there, and I was in one called Beating the Market until October, and that took the conversation. That was like conversation to the 10th degree. That's got to be one of their most active forums in there. Lewis Stevens runs it. I'm a big fan because I really like his investment philosophy. But they had a problem. They're high growth. Okay. So, but then you go in, you join that service then, and they have like 15 channels, one channel for each of their themes, and then there, if you want to go in there and talk about, your investment at a firm or buy now, pay later, they're pretty thematic. You can have conversations all day long. I actually think it becomes counterproductive at a certain point, but yeah. So, just if you're virtual or remote, it's a way to have your ideas tested out. I loved that group until I actually dropped out in November because we were just having debates about the inflation, and I turned out to be right about that, but not because I'm smart, but because I'm very deliberate about who I follow. And especially on macro, this is where Mark is really good, and I'm not good at macro. I just don't spend time on macro. I pick companies. So but I'm selective about who I follow. So yeah, like especially with Lynn Alden's one of my favorite authors. She had just convinced me that the inflation is going to change the dynamic there. So it allowed me to rebalance a little bit, not enough to encounter some of the problems with what's happening to what I'd call the growth tech factor, but doesn't trouble me that much, right? Because I don't worry about quarterly drawdowns too much.
Unless you had your net worth in that Luna Bitcoin that went down 99.99%, right? I don't know if there's that's a bad quarter.
That's bad, right?
Luna cryptocurrency, yeah.
Yeah, and that's supposed to be a stable coin, right?
I don't know. Was that a stable coin? I don't know. I didn't realize if that was the case.
Yeah, I'm behind on that. I thought Luna, and is it or it's linked to a stable coin, or maybe not Luna itself, but I thought there was like a breaking of the buck on
So you sold the business. Hopefully you have a little bit more time. I know you're still heavily involved, but do you have any other projects that you'll be able to work on now? Things you'll have coming up, or that you're thinking on, or you're excited about?
Well, still, my work. I'm still working as hard on the FRM. I'm actually looking to hire an FRM subject matter expert to help for me. So that'll be huge. That'll be first full-time sort of a disciple to help me work on that. Love to find that person. So I'm still working the same on the FRM. I do intellectually. I still practice my data science because I still think that's a fun area, and I hope the firm. I think we're thinking about how to deploy some of our own certificates I
Cool.
think there's a lot of opportunity, in certifications like next step after the FRM for more relevant practice.
Okay. Well, it's interesting to hear about. Any, we'll wrap up here. I know I have some guests that I was expecting that I can hear have arrived.
Oh, sorry.
No, not at all. Not, and they won't mind either that I'm down here talking with you. But I'll just say, any closing points, David, that you'd like to share?
No, AJ, thanks. Maybe we'll schedule another one to talk about.